Welcome to Historic New England's new web streaming series, Leading Voices, conversations on preservation, resilience, and cultural philanthropy. I'm Vince Cipolla, President and CEO of Historic New England. Our Leading Voices series hosts cultural and philanthropic leaders from the United States and abroad, discussing different facets of the critical catalytic role private philanthropy plays in building, protecting, and ensuring our cultural fabric. Cultural philanthropy has played an essential role in the growth of Historic New England, the oldest and largest regional heritage organization in the United States, and a national leader in preservation and storytelling. Resilience, cultural, environmental, social, and economic, requires the forceful and passionate participation of private citizens to ensure that the whole fabric of communities is preserved, fortified, and enhanced. Preservationists, whether through the protection of buildings, priceless archives and objects, landscapes, or entire communities, have always been in the forefront of culture and community building, helping foster more livable, dynamic, and sustainable neighborhoods and landscapes. This Leading Voices program features a conversation between two individuals, Carol Coletta and Candelaria Silva-Collins, who have played key roles in projects that have helped to transform major cities and public spaces around the U.S. They also have both been grantor and grantee, giving them an unusually insightful perspective on the roles of community and private and public partnerships. Carol Coletta is the chief executive of the Memphis River Parks Partnership, leading the relaunch of a nonprofit to develop, manage, and program 6 miles of riverfront in 5 park districts along the Mississippi. Previously, she was a senior fellow at the Henderson Foundation and vice president of community and national initiatives at the Knight Foundation. Carol led the startup of ArtPlace, a broad collaboration established to accelerate creative placemaking, and was president and CEO of CEOs for Cities. She also served as executive director of the Mayor's Institute on City Design. The multifaceted Candelaria Silva-Collins is a Boston-based board chair and facilitator who was the first director of ACT Roxbury, the Cultural Economic Development Program of the Madison Park Development Corporation, from its inception in 1998 until 2007. Under her leadership, she conceived and developed the Roxbury Film Festival, films celebrating people of color, Roxbury Open Studios, Roxbury Discussion Series, among other initiatives, and played a major role in the creation of the Roxbury Center for Arts at Hibernian Hall, involving the rehabilitation of the grand former Boston Irish Dance Hall. Candelaria also is chair of the George B. Henderson Foundation Designators, which awards grants in the design, artistic, and preservation sectors in the Boston area. I am fortunate to serve on the board of the Henderson Foundation with Candelaria, and have also had the pleasure of working with Carol over many years, so it is a particular privilege to have them both speak firsthand about their passions and catalytic contributions. And now, I'm delighted to turn the conversation over to Candelaria and Carol.
Hello, I'm so happy to be here meeting Carol Coletta, and I want to thank Vince Cipolla of Historic New England for inviting us to have this conversation. And so in reading about your work and the notion of civic commons and the notion of public spaces belonging to the public, I was really fascinated because I think that you probably have gathered stories as part of the partnership of the Mississippi River Parks. So I'm wondering, your thoughts about that.
Well, one of the best stories relates to the park that we're about to transform. It's 30 acres of very visible real estate right on the Mississippi River called Tom Lee Park. It's a very interesting story. Tom Lee was an African-American man. He could not swim. He had a small skiff boat. And in 1925, the Engineers Club boat on its inaugural voyage began to sink in the Mississippi River. And there were, he was able to save 32 passengers from that boat, all white, of course, and bring them to shore. In fact, only 17 people survived that sinking that he did not save. And he became a hero, and he was lauded, of course, by by the city fathers, and they took up a collection for him. And this is so of the times. They bought him a small house, and they gave him a job as a sanitation worker, called a garbage man at the time. And that was the best they could do, right, for a black man who had no education. And it's what we've been able to do is that happened on May 8th, and we have been able each year in the past couple of years to bring together both Tom Lee's descendants as well as the descendants of those he saved. And it's a really, sweet and emotional and heartfelt appreciation among them. And it actually, the park was renamed Tom Lee Park in 1954. Very unusual in the South to have a park of this, sort of magnitude named for anyone African American. It was done in 1954. And to see this park now become a signature park on the Mississippi River, I think in a way has a lot to say about, it's very reflective of our history in many ways. So and this park also, just by its location, Candelaria, it is both adjacent to downtown Memphis, but it's also 6 blocks from the poorest zip code in the state of Tennessee. And so that creates stories every day with its use. And anyway, it's been fun to be in the middle of that and lift this park up to, even greater import in the community.
I think those kind of stories and that kind of reckoning is very important for historic houses, places, churches, libraries, beautiful buildings, parks. Almost all of them come from some kind of exploitation originally, particularly in this country. You can't get around it. And I think what we're trying to realize in the cultural economic work we do, in the historical work we do, is not hoarding those stories, but inviting both the descendants of somebody like a Tom Lee, as well as the people he saved. And it's a way of bringing in new voices, letting people know about jobs in community preservation and historic preservation, that the stories and the photos they have are so important. In Boston, Madison Park Development Corporation, I ran a cultural economic development program there called Act Roxbury. And we got our first commercial building, which was an old Irish dance hall called Hibernian Hall that had been boarded up for 20 years. In fact, the Irish musicians had a wake outside of it. After the Irish moved out of that community, it became a site for the Opportunities Industrialization Center, which was a federally funded program. So a lot of African Americans were there, but there were also African American parties. And so when Madison Park bought it, they were going to change it into housing because that's what they do. And a group of us really convinced them, no, we need social spaces. We need gathering spaces. We need places to have the kinds of films and poetry readings we were having. So one of the first events we did was that the person who was the Irish consulate at the time, we had a reunion. And so we had people from the Irish dance hall days, the fiddlers came and they played music, and we had people from the OIC days and they came and people brought their photos. The Mass Memories Roadshow from University of Massachusetts Boston came and scanned photos. So it was a great reckoning because this building meant a lot to so many people. And then we also outreach to the poor neighborhood in terms of money right around it, predominantly Black, also Latinx, and let them know this building that was boarded up had a history. We own this city, and I think that's one of the things, particularly this election has done for me and a lot of other people. We're claiming our American heritage. We are Americans. We are United States citizens, and we should be involved through all of the historic preservation, through all of the civic spaces that are done. We have to own them.
Yeah, I love the idea of a place that has evolved over time in terms of the way it's used and who uses it, and to acknowledge that and celebrate it by bringing that swath of people who have had a role in a building. Isn't that wonderful when there's a container for that, and then you bring life to it through the programming? You lift up the stories, and acknowledge the the right and of everyone to be part of that, and that everyone has been part of that. It's interesting you say that. We've been, we're all of us who run public space, right, are thinking about what can we do this summer. Will people be ready to come back? In what form? How might we program appropriately through the evolution of, more and more of us taking the vaccine? And I was musing about Independence Day, which has historically been a time when we brought everybody to the river and did fireworks and so forth. And they're going to come whether you do fireworks or not. They're going to come and sit and wait on the fireworks, even if you're not having them. So, there's a little bit of but I was listening to Darren Walker, who, of course, president of the great Ford Foundation. Darren's a colleague, and he's so thoughtful. And he was talking about the fact that, Independence Day was not Independence Day for so many Americans and so many Memphians. And it's really begun to weigh on me, trying to think about a celebration that all people enjoy, right, as a food, music, beer, fireworks kind of thing, family, but is certainly not fully representative in any way of the American story that it purports to celebrate. And so how might we incorporate, new traditions into old ones, and so that the story, as you say, becomes fuller. It becomes a fuller story of who we are as this rich, crazy mix of people we are in America. It's an obligation, but it's also really fun.
I also want to talk to you a little bit about Art Place and philanthropy. And when I was going through Art Place, I realized there were 5 different programs that were funded in that 10-year effort that I have ties to. 4 in Boston, but 1 in Jackson, Mississippi, because I did some consulting with the Jackson Medical Mall when they got their Arts Place funding. So that's something where it began and the program funding ended. And I wonder how you think about that. Like what was powerful about it? Are there any things that point to the future of those kinds of initiatives? Should there ever just be a 10-year initiative? Should initiatives be more permanent? What do you think about that?
Those are great questions. I did in fact, Darren Walker was very much part of that story. I was running CEOs for Cities. Darren came to me and said, you really have to do this. The National Endowment for the Arts under Rocco Landesman, brilliant guy, had begun work with Jason Schupak on creative placemaking. And the idea was to try to accelerate the focus and the work of creative placemaking. So a number of foundations came together and formed Art Place and gave me the honor really of running the first 3 cycles of funding there. And I think we all went into it with the idea that we would sunset this. The idea was to seed an idea in as many places as possible, as powerfully as possible, teach ourselves something about it, as we were going, as people were trying things, testing things, and then make it part of the water, right? Make it part of the culture so much that you wouldn't have to have this separate funding as a cluster of funders, but each of those funders might take creative placemaking, as Kresge did, and make it part of their culture and their funding. So that was such an interesting, exciting opportunity to seed an idea. And so I feel like Art Place succeeded beyond its wildest dreams in terms of making that an important piece of how communities think about activating their stories and their places. And it's been, I think, generally very successful around the country. So proud of the work we did there. It was, again, though, you're like any startup, you're sort of making it up as you go along. And we were just trying to run as fast as we can because we felt the moment was then, right? The time was now. We needed to capitalize on the interest and get it out there saying, yes, this is possible. It's possible in the most rural communities, and it's possible in the most urban communities. I'm sure you've been equally at the onset of something that was exciting, that, blew up. What's
Yeah.
your experience?
Well, sometimes people don't believe that things can happen. So when I was doing ACT Roxbury, which stood for Arts, Cultural, and Trade, Roxbury is a predominantly African American community. A lot of things we had to convince even the artists to participate. So we did a lot of listening. We listened to the artists, we listened to citizens and said, what do you want to have happen? And they said regular cultural program, regular events, all of those kinds of things. So we did it. And as I was looking at Art Place, and when I look back through some of the things we did at ACT Roxbury and other places, the Powell Art Center, the notion of gathering together, being able to gather together is so central. I think part of what you do, and I didn't realize we were doing with ACT Roxbury, is that you're creating opportunities for joy. And particularly being out in open space and being on the grounds and seeing beauty, even if that beauty came from exploitation, it does something to your spirit, it does something to your soul. And so making sure that urban residents have opportunities to go to places that have sprawling grounds, that you let people know that they exist. And I think that's part of what historic organizations and the Henderson Foundation, which I chair, in terms of our funding, one of our requirements is that it has to be open and accessible to the public. And then you can't just say that, you have to actually have a plan to make people know that you're here, and you've got to constantly be educating new people. One of the things that I advise a lot of emerging leaders and younger artists and cultural workers and creatives that I mentor is not to be afraid to be the only person of color in the room, because often you will be. I certainly was when I was there, and to realize that there are human beings behind titles. Our responsibility in philanthropy, our responsibility in curating and magnifying public spaces is very, very real. And I think that there's more awareness now that it really is all of us. Yeah, yeah, yeah. We have here the developers were funded, and the taxpayers passed the Community Preservation Act. And so there's money that's set aside for housing, affordable housing, and for preserving all the treasures. You know, Boston's a very old city with a lot of old buildings still, the ones that didn't get destroyed, and that's important. So you mentioned something about working with federal government, working with local government, working with state government. Do you want to talk a little bit about your experience with that and how you reached out to bring them on board?
Well, it's quite varied, and I think based on conversations with my colleagues around the country, and of course multiple positions I've had, I think you said it a minute ago. It's all a people deal, right? I mean, it's like what people want to make happen and are willing to kind of, scale the wall to make happen, scale the rules to make happen, and we actually operate public land, 250 acres of public land on behalf of the citizens of Memphis. So we are a public-private partnership, and it is always difficult to manage. It's always we take the public responsibility seriously, but it is always a negotiation.
One of the things that I've told a lot of artists and creatives is you are citizens too. You pay taxes, you should vote if you're not voting, and that you have to let people know that I'm one of your constituents. And so we had, formal lobby days, but really inviting people. So one of the things we started doing at ACT Roxbury and at other programs I recommend, we invited legislators and funders to everything we did.
Mm-hmm.
We let people know. We gave recognition.
When I was running CEOs for cities, one thing I found is that there were people who I disagreed with on almost every issue, other than they loved their city and they wanted their grandchildren to live in that city. So they didn't want to lose their grandkids to some other better city, more progressive city. So they would make investments in their cities that again belied their overall, maybe what I would perceive their political inclinations. And that always that reminded me again, they came to city work because of family. They came to city work because of a personal interest. And I think you're right about the listening. It's always, if you can listen and understand what's in it for the person you're trying to convince, right? You're going to be more effective in terms of what you do and getting your message out. So I think the listening is very important, and perceiving the interest through that listening of others.
Our cities, our places are going to have to come back from this incredible pandemic, and also all the turbulence and turmoil it has wrought, as well as our political election and all the turbulence that happened with what happened in the Capitol on January 6th, that insurrection. How do you think we come back? What are the things that we need to do?
Well, I mean, that's obviously a big question, but one of the things that I'm really inspired by that might be a model is the Grand Bargain in Detroit. If you think about Detroit, I mean, Detroit was bankrupt. Detroit was bankrupt and down and felt very out. But fortunately, people who, done well over many years, many decades in Detroit, created foundations. And so there was legacy money there. And the foundations were well led, and they got together and said, what can we do? Where can we provide direction and influence to bring this city back, to bring this great city back? And it was the foundations. I mean, they took it on as their job. The foundation leaders, they were going to win, and they made it really easy. We talked about public-private partnerships earlier. The foundations of Detroit were so clear in the direction, in the strategy they were pursuing, and got together in a coherent way that they made it easy for the federal government to invest in Detroit. And it was a fortuitous timing where they were able to get the federal government through the Obama administration specifically involved in Detroit, looking at sort of every federal dollar they could put to work in Detroit to bring it back. And they had good mayoral leadership and carrying on. And you can go to Detroit today and see the incredible work that's been done, not just in downtown, although it's very evident there, but really all over the city by this remarkable partnership. And they saved a city. I mean, they saved Detroit. And now, of course, if you look at not only the neighborhood work, the brilliant neighborhood work by Kresge, the riverfront work by a number of great foundations, including Ralph Wilson, and to look at Dan Gilbert's investments in downtown in these fabulous buildings that were dormant, but that you could never afford to build today. To see those brought back to life, to see the riverfront, reclaimed from a bunch of surface parking lots to become this place where every Detroiter is proud of, to see off the riverfront greenways coming back into neighborhoods, to see the remarkable work, again, at a neighborhood level that Kresge's doing. It's breathtaking.
Yeah, I also would add to that not only in that case where the foundations got together, but in other cities in smaller ways. Sometimes it's the grand bargain, and sometimes it's smaller efforts where an individual, a resident, an artist, a neighborhood association, a historical society says, this cannot disappear. This is vibrant. This is important, because the people are what make it vibrant. And I think sharing with new cities, there's so much information for new cities and towns, whether they're in rural communities or not, that your culture, your geography, your buildings, your history are all going to tell you the story of what needs to be elevated to bring that vibrancy back that may have been misplaced. I won't say it's lost, because I don't believe as long as they're human beings, it's totally lost, but it has been misplaced. I've truly enjoyed talking with you, and I hope that one day we will actually meet in physical time and physical.
I will look forward to that. It's been so much fun. Thank you so much, Candelaria.
Thank you, Carol.
Carol and Candelaria, thank you for sharing in such detail your experiences with public and private philanthropy and how both work as catalysts for communities around the country in inventive and innovative ways. To find out more about our guests today, as well as our other leading voices and Historic New England's amazing work in preservation and storytelling, please visit historicnewengland.org/leadingvoices. On behalf of Historic New England, I'm Vince Cipolla. Thanks for joining us.